In other court news, recently the Supreme Court in the state of Pennsylvania told Republicans in the state that their districts they had drawn were so gerrymandered that they had to go back and redraw them because there was no way the Republicans could ever lose in that state, basically. The Republicans said, okay, we're going to do that, but just please do us a favor, state Supreme Court. Could we just do it after this year's midterm elections? We kind of have a lot going on. Supreme Court understandably said, no, you can't wait. You have until February 15th to get this done, or else we're going to do it for you. And it has to be done before the midterms. And so the Republicans didn't get it. The Supreme Court is now in charge of redrawing these lines. And this week, Donald Trump decided that the rule of law in the United States doesn't matter. Donald Trump told Republicans via Twitter that they need to ignore the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania's ruling that these districts have to be redrawn before the midterms. He does not believe that Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania should adhere to these new districts that are being drawn. Why? Because he thinks that the redrawing is going to benefit the Democrats too darn much. Well, let me tell you something. The way the districts were drawn in the state of Pennsylvania, and the reports on it say that they were essentially like tentacles stretching out into some areas of the state and bending and curving and winding to grab every little last Republican in those areas. And in the last election, more votes were cast for Democrats in Pennsylvania, and yet somehow miraculously Republicans won the majority of the seats because of the gerrymandered districts, which means even though the majority of people in the state of Pennsylvania wanted to be represented by Democrats, they got left with Republicans because that's how badly it was gerrymandered. The Supreme Court understood that. They recognized it. And they said, look, you can't do this. So here is our decision, which means it's the law. And Donald Trump is out there actively telling Republican politicians in the state of Pennsylvania to ignore the rule of law. Now, I myself, I'm no legal scholar. I know a little bit about it. But to me, when you have someone in a position of power over another person and you tell them to ignore the law, which means you tell them to break the law, that's illegal. What Donald Trump is telling these Republicans to do in the state of Pennsylvania could actually be considered a crime in the United States. He is instructing people to break the law because that Supreme Court decision is the law. So by telling these Republicans to not adhere to these redrawn districts, to not follow what the court says, to ignore the rule of law, Donald Trump once again could find himself on the wrong side of American law. But don't worry, nothing's going to happen to him. Nobody's going to pay attention to this. This is an issue like so many other things, unfortunately, that's going to die away. Donald Trump could virtually and seemingly at some points just get away with anything. But could you imagine the responses if Barack Obama ever told anyone ever to ignore the law? Could you imagine what would have happened at that point? I mean, hell, at this point, could you imagine if Barack Obama had done half the things that Donald Trump has done, or even just said some of the things Donald Trump has done? My God, we would have had an armed revolution in this country led by the folks at Fox and Friends. But instead, when Trump says it, when it's their guy, their president, the guy they helped put in office, it's fine. He's right. You know, we shouldn't listen to this Supreme Court that knows more about the law than we ever could. No, listen to the guy who's bankrupted, a dozen businesses. He knows what he's talking about, right? No, Donald Trump is absolutely one of the most dim-witted presidents, certainly the most dim-witted president of my lifetime, which is saying a lot for George W. Bush, but he's only, a tick above him. But the bottom line is that you can't encourage people to break the law, especially when you're the president of the United States, because that could be seen as a direct order to those people to go and break the law. And I hope that there is a lawyer listening to this that says, you know what? maybe that's the crime we can pop him on. Maybe we don't have to wait for the end of the Mueller investigation. Maybe we could use this particular proclamation by the president to finally bring an end to this disastrous presidency. Because you know what? You may not be happy with rulings from the court systems, but guess what? Once they come down, that's the law. That's the law of the land. Their job is to interpret. And so that's what the Supreme Court in the state of Pennsylvania did. Now, Donald Trump is not the only one out there trying to undermine these judges. We do have Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania in the state house, led by Republican Representative Chris Dush, who wants to impeach the justices on that Pennsylvania Supreme Court because they ruled that their gerrymandered districts were illegal. So think about that. We have the president of the United States saying, ignore the ruling. And then we have Republicans in Pennsylvania saying, these judges did something we don't like, so let's remove them from office. That is how desperate Republicans are to keep these gerrymandered districts so that they do not get the expected blue tidal wave that could be headed towards them in this coming November. They're willing to break the law, or at least encourage law breaking. They're willing to impeach law-abiding justices because they disagree with them, just to preserve their own jobs that they obviously know are the result of gerrymandering. If those districts had not been drawn that way, if the state had been divided up evenly and fairly, many of these people would not have jobs today, especially people like Representative Chris Dush there trying to impeach all these judges here. Listen, we have to take a quick break. I am Farron Cousins sitting in for David Pakman. David will be back tomorrow, but you can follow me on Twitter at Farron Balanced. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/The Ring of Fire. You can check out Ring of Fire online at trofire.com. We've got daily videos going up. Myself, Mike Papantonio, David Pakman, Sam Cedar, Tom Hartman, Abby Martin. So go check it out, trofire.com. I'm Farron Cousins and for David Pakman, and we'll be right back.